Hi everyone, and welcome back to We Need to Talk About, a video podcast series where Digital Spy gets together to talk about the biggest moments in TV. I'm here with Ali and Gabriella, and this time we're back with The Roys for Succession Season 3. Woo. Now, before we get into all of the good stuff, Ali's going to give us a recap about what exactly happened in the Season 3 premiere.
Yeah, we figured it was worth kind of like just getting us all up to speed before we dig into the things we liked about the first episode. I thought it was a really interesting episode, and yeah, structurally it's kind of split into two halves. So it picks up immediately after Kendall's press conference at the end of season 2, when he kind of lifts the lid on the full kind of cruise ship scandal that's been plaguing the whole family. And the episode picks up kind of the immediate aftermath of that. So we see Logan Roy splitting his inner circle into two teams. So we have him, Tom, Carl, Frank, and Hugo, the new PR guy, go to Sarajevo from an airplane, which has no extradition treaty in the US, we learn, while Roman, Jerry, and Shiv are sent back to New York to deal with the issue on the ground there. Logan tells people that he's going to step back as the CEO, and we have lots of scenes where the family and the management team kind of try and decide who's going to take his place as a figurehead of the company. While that's all happening, we see Kendall kind of cut back and forth in New York. We see him set up a temporary base of operations at his ex-wife Rava's apartment, which is like high tension, weird decision to make. And we also see him hire two PR consultants to kind of help him steward his image after we have like some great scenes where he lets Greg do his like media monitoring for like 10 minutes and just goes to hell, as you can imagine. Whilst we're with Kendall, we see him make phone calls to Logan's inner circle. So he phones Shiv, who hangs up on him. He also phones Frank and has kind of a weird one-sided conversation with him. After kind of the initial aftermath of that, we have lots of different conversations with Lisa, the lawyer, which boils down to Shiv is attempting to get legal representation from Lisa, who's this kind of like high-fiving New York attorney. She wants Lisa to defend the Roy family. She goes to see Lisa, they have a personal relationship, but Lisa informs her that Kendall has already contacted her to be kind of the face of the case against the Roys. And then in kind of the light of this perceived failure from Shiv, we see Logan at the very end of the episode named Jerry as the interim CEO. And it's all high drama, high tension for like an hour, and I was on the edge of my seat constantly.
Perfect. Thank you, Ali, for that recap. So, first things first, what did you both think of the premiere? Was it everything you hoped it would be? Did it fall short in any capacity? Gabriella, do you want to kick off?
I mean, it was funny. I forgot how funny this show is, and not even in like a cringy, oh God kind of way, but in a genuinely, especially Greg. Like, we have to be real. Greg is like the comedy relief in this show, and he's absolutely amazing. But I definitely lived up. I've been trying to like avoid the takes that were kind of coming out, you know, from critics as well, just because I wanted to have no expectations. But I really felt like everyone was exactly as I remembered them, which was, I think, was good, because sometimes when you jump season to season, there can be character shifts for the sake of plot that don't always hold up. And so I feel like in this episode, it was like, no, they are all exactly as scummy as they were when we left them, which was refreshing and nice. I love it. I just loved it. It was great.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because obviously, like I said, because we pick up like literally immediately after that situation, like the press conference happens, we see Kendall get into a car with Greg and the Waystar like PR woman, and we kind of see that it's like you say, it's like back to back, but we didn't lose anything in that because it's been like 2 years, right? It's been 2019 with season 2, so it's been a while since the show aired. But yeah, we didn't lose any of that characterization, and yeah, it was just funny. You forget, I mean, it's trite because it's Succession. It's like one of the most like critically loved shows on TV at the moment, but it is so good. And I think going into it, I was like, oh, maybe because we binged it in lockdown, maybe I kind of like have hyped it up, or maybe it's not the show I remember it being. And then watching it, I'm just like, no, everything about this is just like, from the writing to the performances to, like you say, the comedy, it's just all hit on every level. And yeah, we got like a bunch of good Greg scenes, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a bit, which kind of made my day. And yeah, the tension, I think I said earlier, watching it, me and my partner always say like, oh, it's funny because it's just like a dialogue show, and it's really just lots of scenes of kind of people hashing things out. There's not a lot of like action or anything like that. But the tension it manages to like work into every conversation. Like I never know how a scene is going to end. I never know who's going to come out on top. So you end up being so like, especially the end of this episode, I was like, what's going to happen? What's Shiv going to do? So yeah, having that back was great.
Yeah, I thought it was great. It was everything I thought it was going to be. Pretty much lived up to all my expectations. Every critic in the World Ball one I think I read thought it was excellent. And I just cannot tell which way it's going to go at this stage. It's so uncertain, and that just creates peak interest and intrigue. Weirdly, I found Greg really irritating in this episode.
No.
I think it's because the stakes are so high right now, and he's just getting in the way. He just feels like an adult playing dress up, and that to me, I was like, focus, Kendall needs you to focus, and he was just being useless. So that to me, for the first time in a while, Greg, I didn't find him particularly funny, and I felt like with a couple of the characters, Roman in particular, we know that he can be really vile and crude at times, and in the past, I found that quite amusing in a really sick, perverted way, but it felt like almost these characters have been written to fulfill the expectations that people have of them, and because of that, in places it felt a little bit forced and not particularly organic. But that's a very, very minor point. I think because the first 2 seasons are so strong, the bar was set so high, it's just quibbles at this point because it does everything so well. But I loved it. I think they're moving all the key movers and shakers into position. This was very much sort of a setup episode, and I'm excited to see where it goes from here and what happens.
Do you think, because I think like it's interesting that you said like both Greg and Roman, because they are like, in some ways they're the most like caricature-y, well, maybe not caricature is not the right word, but they have kind of like in some ways some of the most extreme, like goofy personalities. And maybe this season, I mean, the whole show's kind of been about Kendall and Logan at the heart of it in some ways. But this season feels like it's going to be so much the Kendall, Logan, Shiv, like triangle. So maybe, did you feel like when we're seeing Greg and Roman, they're kind of like in their own world, basically, kind of removed from the kind of high stakes that's happening between those three?
Yeah, totally. It felt tonally they were on a different level altogether. I mean, you've got, Brian Cox calling his son a CUNT, he's in beast mode, and Greg is looking up, tweets on the internet about tater tots, and they're just so very, very different spaces right now. And I think that clash perhaps didn't work for me, but then again, because the characters are so horrible to each other, I do appreciate that you do need those two particularly to just break it up a bit so it's not quite as brutal. But again, it's such a minor point. I loved it. I thought it was great, and I can't wait to see where it goes from here.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I think for me, like I think probably say for Gabriella, like the Greg comedy is always it's almost like a nice, like it's a nice little reprieve in between some of those, like it kind of eases the tension. But it was funny, like I like when you have the kind of scenes where those worlds collide, like when they're in Rava's apartment and they're talking to the PR person, and Greg's like, I wrote down some tweets, like, is that useful? And she's like, well, she's like, are they all on Twitter? And he's like, yeah, they're all on Twitter. She's like, okay, we'll find them. Like, it was funny seeing him interact with the kind of like the adults world, basically.
I think he's meant to also be the audience in a way, right? Because most of the people watching this show are probably not like the Roys, as much as there are families out there like the Roys. They're like, and obviously we know a little bit more about the way social media functions, especially Allie. We're a little more plugged in, but in a way, that's the gaze that we're coming into it with, of like, it's so high stakes, but it's comical. It's like, it is comical high stakes in a way, because what are they? I mean, yes, Logan could go to jail, and that is serious, but separate to that, the company falls like, okay, it's not like no one's gonna die. It doesn't have that. It's not those kinds of stakes. So for Logan to be as like sunken into his power as he is, and not wanting, that's what it is. He doesn't want to give that up, and that makes it comical, right? And I think that's what it. The whole thing reminds me of King Lear, and I know that sounds really cliche and trite, but it really, really does, in the sense of like, you've got Logan who doesn't want to give up his power at all. You've got the 3 kids in King Lear's 3 daughters, but like, it's all about like plotting and power and relationships. And then you've got the Fool, and then you've got Greg, and there's all of those things. And when you talk about it being a dialogue show, that's plays, right? And so much of it is moved by what the characters reveal about themselves through their dialogue. And I think with Greg, what I found interesting was that he's cringy in a way, but it reminded, it was a nice kind of balance to when Kendall's talking to the two PR women or like media managers, and he's like, go, you talk. And then right before they can say anything, he's like, well, I've got this. And effectively, he's doing what Greg has done. He's been like, off the hook tweets, and they're just like,
it's like, he's playing too, right? Like he's pretending.
Yeah, exactly. And none of them know what the hell they're talking about. And when they're confronted with people who do know what they're talking about, they still can't give up that power, right? Yeah. So just like his father, Kendall still can't be like, okay, I'm going to divest this to you because you know what you're doing. He literally can't give up that power, even if it's shooting himself in the foot. So I think that was so interesting, is like the kind of other side of the incompetence coin. Greg is on one side and Kendall's on the other.
Yeah, and I think while we're kind of like talking generally, I think like part of the tension for me in this episode came from, because like the thing with Kendall is that he is a loose cannon, and as much as like sometimes I want to root for him, you are also like, you're this like ultimate fail son. You're not actually very good at the thing you do, and I think I saw that, you know, the difference between the way the episode opens with like Logan sitting in silence, essentially sitting in silence, Brian Cox not speaking for the first 10 minutes, and then you have Kendall like
in the
being
bath,
kind of in the bath, in the cab, being like really manic, and like you see the kind of, Kendall wants them to be on equal footing, but in actuality, like they're not at all. Like Kendall is all nerves, he's all kind of like chaotic energy, and Logan is kind of like taking everything in and planning things. And actually, like, does Kendall really know what to do with this thing that he's just done, or is it just pure impulse? He's like, I'm going to hold a press conference, I'm going to say that I've done this thing, and he has no plan for what to do. He has no way of like following through.
I think that also speaks to something that's really at the heart of the character, which is like, because when he comes to Rava's apartment, he's like, I've done this for you, and the look on her face is like, what are you talking about? You did not do this for me. He has no idea why he's doing what he's doing. He's just reacting, and it's like you say, he's just this chaotic energy that's reacting to whatever's going on externally. He has no internal sense of self, really, which is probably his father's fault, right? It's like
he's trying to win his dad's attention. Everything all of them do are literally saying, Dad, love me, pay attention to me, and his love is so, is it even love? Do we even think he loves his children? He wants them to be a version of themselves that I just don't think they can even reach. He says to Kendall previously, you're not a killer, and obviously we know he has killed someone accidentally, but he is
the bit in the car,
killer. Oh my God.
The bit in the car when Kendall's like, who could say if I've not ever murdered anyone? And I was like, oh my God, this man is
face.
He's lost it. This is not in a to be candid about it, not to be like insensitive. Is Kendall, something I struggle to remember, is Kendall sober in this episode?
I don't know if he is, and that's the problem. He's an addict, right? He self-destructs, and he does not strike me right now as a man in control. He is riding along. He's riding along on the currents. He's not in control. He's being carried along, and I just feel like it's going to crash at some point, and he's just gonna crumble.
Yeah, there's a couple of scenes where he like, obviously the first episode is him in a bathroom, coming out of the bathroom. But there's a couple of scenes in the episode where he like appears in a scene or like appears in a room, and we haven't seen where he's been before. And it's a bit like, I couldn't remember, and we can get to Naomi in a bit maybe, but I couldn't remember where we landed on that, whether Kendall was sober at this point or whether he was like using again, because obviously he has this manicness about himself. You spoke to Sarah Snook, didn't you?
Yeah, I had a chat with Sarah Snook. It was very brief. It was 10 minutes. It was just me hurtling questions at her, and she was very coy, didn't say an awful lot, just kind of promised more power battles, more tension. I spoke to her about the fact that obviously in the first episode, as you said, Jerry is put in place as interim CEO. Shiv is once again overlooked. You can just see the devastation on her face. She's thinking, what more do I have to do or say? And she's definitely, out of the three kids, the most competent, the most able, and the smartest. Half the stuff that comes out of Kendall's mouth, I don't understand what he's saying half the time. I'm just like nodding along, like, don't know what you mean by that. Whereas Shiv is just, she's worked in politics. She knows how these games work. She's totally plugged in. And again, her dad just doesn't seem to trust her. I don't know if he wants to break her down to such a point and see if she can rise up again and rise to the challenge, or if he really just doesn't believe in her. But she spoke about the impact, Sarah spoke about the impact that decision had on her character, and she essentially said that she's going to keep on trying to prove to her dad that she is worthy and able, but obviously at the end of the episode she's played errand girl, nothing's gone her way, no one's listening to her, no one is listening to anything she has to say. Do we think that she's going to defect to Kendall's side, or do we think that's too obvious and she's gonna do something unexpected?
I think my gut says she's not going to defect, but only because I wonder how Tom fits into that. Do you know what I mean? And I mean, their relationship is a whole other
business arrangement.
Yeah, that look on your face, Abby. That's it. That is but I do think that she understands that he could be useful to her. And I think if she positions herself on Kendall's side, then that puts her in opposition to him. I don't know that she wants to make herself more vulnerable. And I think doing that would make her more vulnerable. But I do think it's interesting because the show is so odd about women in a way, and not in a bad way. I just think her character is so, being a woman is so key for her and for Jerry, obviously. And like they mention it and they talk about how it would be great to have a woman because they're dealing with this whole sexual assault scandal. But I think in general, the show, I mean, like what's happened to Logan's wife? Where is she? The mother is like mentioned. It's like, there's all these like, it's like the women aren't as key players. Even Jerry, like, yes, Jerry's important, but she's not making decisions. She's a puppet. Even before, she was basically just damage controlling and kind of like, I want to do this with my hands. She's like, oh, hurt this way, go this way. But she's not a decision maker in the same way. And so I feel like it'll be interesting to see how Sarah Snook's character, how Shiv develops and finds her own footing, because, and I don't know if it's a fault of the writer, or not a fault, I don't know if it's a result of the writers or the ultimate idea of where they want the show to go, but I feel like she needs more than just to be everyone's power hungry, but they are all have another kind of dimension, and I don't know what hers is yet. I feel like we haven't plugged into that yet.
Yeah, and I think on that vein, like I think in previous seasons, especially I guess the first half of season 1, season 1 and the first half of season 2, she had this like her life and her career was like separate to Waystar Royco, right? Like she didn't work. She's never worked for the company, so I think that's an interesting dynamic to that. And obviously, she was in politics, and she worked with like the Bernie Sanders stand-in with Gil, and like that was kind of the other dynamic there. And she was having the affair with her like old colleague, and there were things happening there. But like you say, that's kind of been dropped to a certain extent. And I'm curious to see. We should talk about who we think, like that decision process about who got to be in charge. But I'm curious to find out what the show does with the kind of implicit misogyny at the core of some of these decisions, because like there's no two ways about it. Like a factor in why she was overlooked and has been overlooked in the past is because she's Logan's daughter, not his son, and like that plays a key part in like the idea of succession in general, right? You know, firstborn son, all that sort of thing. And obviously the show's now dealing with this sexual assault and kind of like murder stuff and kind of the abuse of women on the cruise ships. You've got Jerry, and there's a few lines in the first episode of season 3 where Logan says a few, like, I mean, calling Roman a cunt. He says something really crude when they're about to get in a van, and Roman's like, he said to his son on the eve of a sexual assault allegation, like, Logan is not going to change his behavior for anyone or the way he speaks for anyone. And it's interesting to see, it will be interesting to see the show grapple with that and see characters surrounding Logan maybe try and rein that in, or because he seems to understand that appointing a woman as CEO would be like good PR in this situation. But even that obviously is like the ultimate cynical, shrewd move. So yeah, I'm just interested to see what the show does with that.
Yeah, it's all about the optics, putting Jerry at the head of the company. It reminded me of that moment in Sex Education season 3 when the new headmistress says to Viv, a black woman, she says, the only reason I'm letting you stand up in front of the school and talk to people is because you're black. That's why you're doing it. It looks good. Not for any other reason. And that's very much the case with what Logan's doing. I think I don't ever want us to get to a space with television where we have to have morally straight characters and that's it. I think it's important that we do see these reprehensible characters on screen behaving in reprehensible ways, because there are people like that in the real world behaving in exactly that way. So I think it's it's important that we still have these people on our screen, however distasteful and disgusting it is to watch at times, and however much you might disagree. I think it's really, really important that we have characters like Logan, who are he's just a pit of nothingness. He's just black inside, isn't he? And I think it's really important that he remains that way. And I actually wouldn't mind if we never ever see a redemption arc.
I don't think
any
we will.
kind of change, because look at the age he's at. Is he 70s, 80s? He's never going to change, and it's important that he stays as he is right until, you know, his dying day, and all the characters around him have to adapt and evolve in regards to that.
But I think the Succession, I mean, that's the whole testament to the show, right? Like, the writer's room is strong enough that it can talk and tackle like the implicit misogyny in the situation it's created without trying to redeem. Like, the solution is not to like redeem any of these characters really, but you can do it with, you know what I mean, like the way the show is structured can tackles these topics in an interesting way. So, and I'm sure they will do, because it already feels like they're starting to kind of like point at things and be like, isn't it weird that this has happened? Or like, I
think it goes back to like, the show is inherently about power, right? And power doesn't, there's no place for a kind of moralistic reading of people or the world when all that these people want is power, and they want to be in charge, and they want to, you know, leave a legacy and a mark and not be forgotten. And to do it, they want power to do that. And I think that's what makes it, they're not full of hate, right? Like, Logan's is not, I mean, maybe he does hate women and whatever, but that's not what comes out, right? He's not saying these things because he really fundamentally hates women. He's saying them because it's all about power dynamics, right? Sexism is a power dynamic that pits men against women. And he's leaning into that power dynamic because he's on the stronger side of it. And so he's using that because that's the arsenal that he has. I don't think it's because he has any particular feelings about women, right? That's just, you know, that's just when he says to Roman, he's like, are you going to suck my dick? It's like, that's that's him making a power move. It's not about sexuality or anything like that. Like, these are just words that are part of the power structure, devoid of his emotions, because the only thing he cares about is his power and staying in power. So that's like, you know, just makes me so mad.
Power cannot exist without other people being oppressed in relation to it. That's what power is, right? That's how you get to the top. You climb on the backs of other people to assert yourself. And he is using the lanes and the methods that he knows works to achieve that. So there's no evil there. He's just doing what needs to be done, however stomach churning that may be for the rest of us, but he doesn't see it that way. Do you guys have any favorite moments from the premiere?
So the two that I want to, the small one that I want to flag is there's just a funny moment which really worked for me, was Logan, when Kendall phones Logan in the car, or when Logan phones Kendall in the car, and they're on the phone and Jess is in between them, and it was such like this, that there are moments in the show where you're like, oh, it's just about kids, and like, it's like you said, they just want a kiss. Have you seen, there's a parody of the title song where someone puts lyrics to it, and it's just like, who will get a kiss from daddy?
All the rich white folk are going to argue, and then whoever's best is going to win a kiss from daddy. Who will get a kiss from daddy?
It's very funny, and that's this moment, right? And Logan's on the phone, and he can't legally talk to Kendall, and Kendall can't legally talk to him. So Jess is being like, oh, he said this. And Kendall's like, well, I can't speak to him, but if you speak to him, tell him that I said this. And it's just this incredibly juvenile framing of a very intense, serious conversation. Like, tell him I'm not speaking to him, basically. That scene was just hilarious. And them in the car in general, you know, we spoke about Greg chipping in and trying to be part of it. And when the PR woman leaves and she's like, Greg, are you coming with me? And he's like, oh, I'm just going to get a lift with these guys. It's like, he doesn't know, does he know what's happening, or is he's just swept up in every moment? Like,
well, that's the thing about Greg, that I think, going back to why I find him a little bit irritating in the first episode, we know he's got foresight in his cunning, because he kept those papers he was supposed to destroy, which detail all of the things that were happening in the company. So I felt like they kind of renegated on that a bit, and he just came across as quite idiotic in this episode. And I know he's not an idiot, because we've seen that from him before. But yeah, that was very funny, that conversation in the car. He did not know what was going on. Smiling and waving.
What was your other one, Alan?
My other thing, well, so my other big one was like, do we want to talk about that? The whole framing of like who will get to be CEO, And like that comes, you know, we have Tom phoning Shiv from the toilet, which I thought was a really like, because like you said, their relationship is really complicated and weird. And she's like, do I want it? Do I not want it? And then obviously the place we end up is like Logan is ready to give the CEO position to Roman. And then Roman phones him and basically says, please don't make me CEO. Let Jerry be CEO in not so many words. And I just thought that was really interesting to see sort of like, because that's as close as we've got to the concept of the show, right? Is like Logan naming a successor is kind of the whole thing. And so to have that in this episode up front, I thought was really, and for him not to pick one of his children was really interesting.
I loved the moment where they're in Rava's apartment and she starts yelling at Greg, and Kendall gets up and leaves the meeting with the lawyer, and Lisa's just like, and you can see the look on her face like, what is this guy doing? Yeah. And then you switch into this thing and it's this like domestic quibble, but it's still about power, right? Because you've got the new girlfriend and the ex-wife and this bottle of wine or champagne or whatever it is, and Greg in the middle, like the corkscrew, just like she told me to do it. And I just was like, because it's all these little power struggles. The whole thing is about these people and their relationships to power in each other. And I really like Rava, even though I get frustrated with all of them. I think I like Rava the most because she's very, like when she says when Kendall's like, did you watch it? And she's like, no, I have work. Like she's just like, I don't care. Like whatever you're gonna do in blowing up your life, fine. I have my life. Like I think she's almost the most relatable in that way, because even though she lives this very extravagant lifestyle based again on like obscene amounts of money, you know, she's a mother and she's got her career and she's much more, I think, real in that way. And when she says that line where she's like, after they open the wine and she's like, it just reminds me that beautiful things are always break. Or she says something super just like cutting and devastating. And she says it just like, well, there we go. Like, and it just, she gets such small morsels, but everything she does, and it does go back to the show being so well cast and well written, is everything she does is so full of, it's imbued with meaning. It's so powerful. But the characters around her, Kendall is just like, like, it's like, woof, right over his head. He doesn't even get what she's saying or doing or anything. But I think as a character, she's super compelling. And that was one of my favorite moments, I think, was just that, especially when Lisa just watching him leave, that whole little thing. I was like, and it goes back to what you were saying earlier, Ali. It's like Kendall's literally just chaotic energy bouncing off whatever happens to him. He can't be like, I'm going to let them deal with that. I'm going to sit here and talk to the lawyer because this is important.
Because this is the most important thing in the world. Literally, my whole life, I've blown up my whole life, and then I'm going to leave.
Yeah, exactly. And also Naomi, I don't like her.
What's our read on?
I don't like her.
Do we think she's a mole? Do we think she has real feelings for Kendall? Do we think she's like what do we think her role is going to be in this season? Because she seems like I've kind of forgot about her, and then that she has like, you know, 2 moments in this episode. One where she arrives, and it's weird that he invited her to. It's weird that he went to Rava's place rather than just like hire a hotel or something. It's weird that he invites Naomi, and even though it feels like a calculated move, right? That she picks the dustiest, clearly oldest bottle. We know she comes from money. There's no way that she doesn't know that bottle of wine is probably worth more than the houses that all of us live in. Like, she knows in that moment what she's done, and it just was like a really interesting glimpse.
Well, it's a power play. It's a power, like it's all even on the tiniest little interpersonal way, it's all about power. And that's why I find the show so interesting, is because like those dynamics are explored usually in quite flat ways. But this was, it's so nuanced. But yeah, Naomi's an interesting one, and I feel like it's hard to tell yet. I don't know what her deal is, but I don't trust her. No. I just don't.
So, what do you guys want to see from the next episode and beyond? What didn't you get from the first episode of season 3 that you are dying to see?
Am I correct in thinking that Kendall said he had Marsha on his side?
Yeah. And I think so in season 2 she leaves him because he's having the affair with Holly Hunter's character.
Yes.
Right, but we haven't seen her since then.
Where is she?
Yeah, so that
and
I
her son.
Know what's exact, like, right?
Oh
like,
my God,
they're still married, right? Like legally,
Yeah.
they're still married, and that is important because also, I don't know if it's true in the UK, but in America, you can't compel a spouse to testify against another spouse. So if they're still married, she can't testify against him. But if they get divorced, she can. So like, there's a lot that's going to happen there, and I think that's what. Again, I think I'm also just interested in the women in the show because women are great. Duh. So I think I'm really curious to see like how that power because it was so important in the first season when Logan was unwell, and then I feel like she kind of got sidelined a little bit, and now I want to see more of her character and how important she becomes as everything kind of unfolds. So that's what I'm hoping that comes up in the next episode and the rest of the season.
For me, it's this is like soppy because it's not necessarily
I think I know what you're going to say.
Oh, maybe, but what I actually want to see is like Kendall, Shiv and Roman like hang out and chat. Like the moments in the show when the power, like all the power dynamics and the opulence and the stuff that we've talked about gets cut through are the moments when you have Kendall and Shiv like talking, or Kendall and Roman talking, and you kind of see that like the game is big and it could ruin their lives, but also like they do, they have affection. There is some affection there because they've all been damaged in the same way. And I love seeing them interact. I love seeing like the kind of the little dynamics between the different pairs. Obviously, like Roman and Shiv like constantly going at each other. Kendall, like I like seeing those little kind of duos happen. So I want to see. And obviously, we didn't get any of this in the first episode because they were kind of separated. So I'd love to see them like team, like not even team up, but I want to see conversations between the siblings again because it's what brings me joy.
Oh, also we should mention we've yet to see Adrian Brody's character and Alexander Skarsgård's characters as well. I think Adrian Brody plays an billionaire activist, and Skarsgård plays some confrontational tech CEO. They both sound dreadful, but I can't wait to see what they're gonna bring to the table.
That's the thing. There's so much. The show does so much. Like it's like I said, this first episode was table setting, but I have no idea. Like there were these huge guest stars that are going to be in it over the next 7 or 8 episodes. Like who knows where we'll be in 3 months' time? Like who knows what the state of play will be?
So that's what we thought of Succession Season 3. If you agreed with what we said or disagreed, please remember to let us know in the comments. And if you like this video, don't forget to like and subscribe for plenty more from Digital Spy.
Bye.
Woo!